Just because they want to see your body does not mean that they want to see your soul. Just because they want to see your body does not mean that they want to see your soul. Welcome to Vibes N Affirmations, where there's a thin line between crashing out and keeping it all together. I'm your host, G, your favorite voice of reason and sometimes chaos. And today, we're unpacking something that cuts deep for a lot of us. We're talking about the difference between being desired and being valued. Because in a world that celebrates being wanted, reposted, sexualized, and thirst over, the line between intimacy, attention, and actual self-worth can get real blurry real fast, especially when sex, power, and identity are all collided. We've been taught, directly or indirectly, that desire is currency. If someone wants you, you matter. But what happens when the wanting stops? Let's talk about the scripts that we have internalized, the healing we've been avoiding, and the freedom that hits different when you realize you don't need to be wanted to be whole. Let's get into it. But first, let's set the tone with today's affirmation. Are you ready? My sexual expression is valid and it does not define my worth. Yes, say it with me. My sexual expression is valid, but it does not define my worth. This isn't about shame. It's about honesty, about naming messages that we were handed before we even knew what they meant. Messages that told us that our worth was tied to how wanted we were. It's about examining the culture that we're constantly swimming in, the one that glamorizes attention, over sexualizes identity, and rarely teaches us how to connect with ourselves outside of being desired. It's about compassionately unpacking the ways that we have learned to survive, sometimes through sex, sometimes through performance, while slowly relearning what safety, agency, and real self-worth actually looks like beyond the bedroom. Here's the thing. Sex is not the problem, y'all. It's a lot about what we calling freedom that is actually just performance. For attention, for validation, for proximity to power, if you ask me. And don't get me wrong, being desired can feel amazing. When someone wants you, it feels like visibility, like power, like proof that you matter. But if the only time you feel truly seen is when your body is in the focus, if the most consistent form of attention shows up as a late night what you doing, that doesn't make you weak. It just means that somewhere along the way, you were taught that being wanted was the closest thing to being loved. Let's keep it a stack. Most of us weren't taught how to explore sexuality. We were exposed to it. We weren't having open, honest conversations about sex and identity with the adults in our lives. We were watching music videos at 10 years old. We started picking up these messages without realizing it. Messages like, if people want you, that means you matter. If you're not being desired, something must be wrong with you. Sex is how you prove your worth, and those messages didn't come from just the media. They came from our surroundings. Growing up in environments where sex was everywhere, but the meaning behind it was nowhere. For a lot of girls, that meant learning how to be desirable before they even learn how to say what they actually want. For a lot of boys, it meant being pressured to pursue sex without even being taught how to feel safe or connected in it. And it's not just in theory. Studies have shown that early repeated exposure to hypersexualized media is linked to lower self-esteem, anxiety, poor body image, difficulty setting or understanding boundaries, risky or unfulfilling sexual behaviors. And that's not because sex is bad. It's because the context around sex was missing. Because when you grow up in a world that teaches you to be wanted, but never teaches you how to be valued, it is easy to start confusing attention with affection, with actual connection. That confusion doesn't mean you're broken. It just means that you're human. But it is also something worth having a conversation on. It's okay to have sex. It's okay to like being desired. There is nothing wrong with that. But the real power is knowing that you don't need that type of attention to feel good about yourself. When you actually know your worth, you stop giving people access to your body, hoping that they'll eventually care about you or your heart. Sex stops being a way to prove something. It starts being about the choice you make from a place of confidence and clarity. This topic honestly made me think about the first time I had sex. Your girl started young. I had no business losing my virginity at the age that I did. And I've sat with that moment a lot over the years, trying to figure out why it happened so early. I used to tell myself, well, I've always been mature for my age. And to a degree, that is true. I've always been mentally ahead of my peers. But that didn't explain everything. The older I got, the more I learned about trauma and sexual development. And the more I realized that my hypersexuality wasn't just me being curious. It was rooted in things that I didn't have the language for back then. Now, we're not diving into all that today. But I do want to mention this. The person I lost my virginity to was older than me. And at the time, I was drawn to that, to people that seemed to know more, who felt more in control. And because I was so mature for my age, I thought to myself, I can handle it. But looking back, that whole experience was just the beginning of me confusing desire with being valued. I thought his interest meant something deeper, that I was special. But reality hit real quick because a week later, that motherfucker flipped, literally. Like, where was the person that was trying to take my V card? But we live and we learn, you feel me? The same person who pursued me turned around and degraded me. That was my first introduction to the coldness of how some men move. And no, I don't regret it. That was the moment that the real one in me started forming. But it taught me something that I carry for years. Just because someone wants you does not mean that they respect you. And if you're not clear on your value, it is easy to mistake their desire for something that is not. I want you to think about a moment when intimacy felt more like a performance than a choice. Were you looking to be affirmed, needed, or seen? What did you actually want in that moment? Closeness, control, comfort, or confirmation? Was it the media I grew up consuming? The way that people talked about beauty, bodies, masculinity, femininity, family, culture, friend groups? How did that message show up in my life? And is it still influencing who I am today? What do I enjoy? What do I want? What makes me feel safe, powerful, and present? And how do I define sex if I didn't feel like I needed to impress anyone or live up to anyone else's fantasy? How do I feel when I'm not being pursued, flirted with, complimented, or desired? Do I still feel grounded in my worth? Does the silence trigger self-doubt? What does it actually reveal about how I've internalized attention and identity? Because honestly, these questions I had to sit with, and you'd be surprised what you could come up with. I find that a lot of us have moved through sex, not fully understanding our why. We have chased attention when really we wanted affirmation. We have said yes when we didn't fully feel safe. We have confused desire for love and silence for rejection. We have made ourselves available, hoping that someone will finally see us as enough. Give yourself permission to slow down, unpack the conditioning, and define what intimacy really looks like on your terms, not on what you were taught, sold, or pressured into. The real glow up is knowing that your value doesn't rise or fall based on who wants you. It comes from you, your awareness, your choices, your ability to show up for yourself, even when nobody else is checking for you. So take the time with these questions, revisit them, be honest, compassionate, and most importantly, be real with yourself. Because the deeper your clarity, the deeper your boundaries, and the more powerful your pleasure becomes. That's it for this week's episode of Vibes and Affirmations. If this episode hits or helped you rethink the game, share it with someone who's still playing for the wrong team. Don't forget, follow the podcast so you never miss a drop. Until next time, humans, stay solid and keep vibing.